The skies over the South China Sea are turning into a flashpoint for military tensions. In the latest example, a Chinese J-11 fighter jet intercepted a U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft flying within just 10 feet of the American plane. This wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a broader, escalating pattern of encounters between Chinese and U.S. forces in one of the most strategically contested regions on the planet. We'll dissect the facts, connect them to broader geopolitical trends, and explore what this means for the future of global stability. The incident in question involved a dangerously close encounter. A U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft was conducting what the U.S. military described as a routine surveillance over the South China Sea when it was intercepted by a Chinese J-11 fighter jet. According to the Pentagon, the Chinese pilot executed an unsafe maneuver, closing to just 10 feet of the American plane's wingtip. At such close distances, even a minor miscalculation could have led to a catastrophic mid-air collision. Such incidents are not new. In December 2022, another U.S. RC-135 was intercepted in a similarly aggressive manner by a Chinese J-11 fighter. The Chinese jet flew directly in front of the U.S. aircraft, forcing the American pilot to take evasive action to avoid a crash. These actions, described as unprofessional by U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, are part of an alarming trend of increasingly risky behavior by Chinese military pilots. In June 2022, a P-8 Poseidon surveillance aircraft operated by the Royal Australian Air Force faced a similar encounter. A Chinese J-16 fighter intercepted the Australian plane and released chaff, a countermeasure made of small aluminum strips, into the flight path of the Poseidon. This reckless act was widely condemned as it endangered the lives of the Australian crew. Despite international criticism, such aggressive maneuvers have only increased. These incidents are part of a pattern of escalating tensions between the U.S. and China in the region of South China Sea. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, unsafe encounters with Chinese military aircraft have surged over the past 2 years. Since late 2021, there have been more than 180 reported incidents of close interactions between U.S. and Chinese forces in the region, with many classified as unsafe or aggressive. This rise in confrontations has echoes of the infamous 2001 Ares II collision, when a Chinese fighter jet collided with a U.S. Navy surveillance aircraft over the South China Sea. The Chinese pilot was killed, and the U.S. plane was forced to make an emergency landing on Hainan Island. The incident triggered a major diplomatic crisis, with China detaining the U.S. crew for 11 days. Despite lessons learned from that incident, close encounters have only become more frequent. What's particularly concerning is that these confrontations aren't limited to U.S. aircraft. In May 2023, Canadian pilots reported being intercepted by Chinese jets while enforcing United Nations sanctions against North Korea. The Chinese jets reportedly flew dangerously close to the Canadian aircraft, signaling Beijing's willingness to challenge international norms in multiple regions. So, after all, why the South China Sea region is so special? You see, the South China Sea is one of the most strategically and economically significant regions in the world. China claims nearly the entire sea under its controversial 9-dash line, a claim that was invalidated by an international tribunal in 2016. Despite this ruling, China has doubled down, constructing artificial islands, equipping them with military bases, and enforcing its claims through aggressive naval and aerial patrols. The U.S., for its part, conducts regular freedom of navigation operations to challenge China's claims and assert that these waters remain open under international law. These operations involve U.S. Navy ships and aircraft traversing areas China considers its territory, which Beijing views as a direct challenge to its sovereignty. Adding to the tension is the fact that the South China Sea serves as a critical global trade route. Over $3 trillion in trade passes through these waters every year, making it a key artery for the global economy. It's also rich in resources, with vast reserves of oil, natural gas, and marine biodiversity. Control over this region would give any nation a significant economic and strategic advantage. However, these intercepts aren't just dangerous. They're actually part of a bigger geopolitical struggle between two superpowers. For China, these aggressive actions are a way to assert its dominance and send a message to both the US and its allies. For the US, maintaining a military presence in the South China Sea is about upholding the rules-based international order and ensuring that no single country can unilaterally rewrite international norms, but the risks are enormous. The South China Sea is a crowded theater, with ships and aircraft from multiple countries operating in close proximity. Even a single misstep, whether due to pilot error, technical malfunction, or miscommunication, could escalate into a full-blown crisis. This is not mere speculation. The 2001 collision between the US and Chinese aircraft is a stark reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control. What's happening in the South China Sea is part of a larger pattern of assertive Chinese military behavior. Similar incidents have been reported in the East China Sea, where Chinese and Japanese forces regularly face off over disputed territories like the Senkaku Islands. In one case, Japanese pilots reported Chinese aircraft flying dangerously close to their patrols, forcing them to take evasive action. Even on land, China's aggressive posture is evident. Along its border with India, Chinese and Indian troops have engaged in repeated skirmishes over disputed territories in the Himalayas. These incidents highlight a consistent strategy. China is willing to push the limits to assert its claims, whether in the skies, on the seas, or on land. With tensions at a breaking point, the question remains: how do we de-escalate and find lasting solutions? First and foremost, dialogue is critical. Regular US-China talks and ASEAN-led forums like the East Asia Summit could help reduce miscalculations. Finalizing a legally binding code of conduct in the South China Sea is another key step. Military confidence-building measures, such as hotlines between US and Chinese military commands or joint search and rescue exercises, could build trust and prevent misunderstandings. Upholding international law, like the 2016 tribunal ruling that invalidated China's 9-dash line, is also essential, though it requires stronger enforcement and multilateral pressure. Third-party mediation by organizations like the UN or EU could offer neutral ground for negotiation. Additionally, shifting focus from confrontation to cooperation, such as joint resource exploration, could yield mutual benefits and ease friction. Public awareness plays a vital role, highlighting the risks of escalation and the shared stakes in global trade and security. Ultimately, resolving these tensions requires global commitment. Failure to act will have far-reaching consequences beyond the South China Sea. These growing tensions have drawn global attention, with nations taking sides and shaping the region's geopolitical dynamics. The US has condemned China's actions as unsafe and increased freedom of navigation operations and joint drills with allies to reinforce its stance on open waters. Nations like the Philippines and Vietnam are pushing back. Manila has filed diplomatic protests, while Hanoi emphasizes the importance of the 2016 tribunal ruling. Australia, after Chinese jets targeted its aircraft, has condemned Beijing's actions and reaffirmed support for the rules-based order. Europe has weighed in too, with France and the UK sending naval vessels to assert solidarity with the US. Meanwhile, Canada has criticized China for unsafe maneuvers during UN sanctions enforcement. China defends its actions as safeguarding sovereignty and views US military activities as provocations. Its willingness to challenge international norms highlights how this issue transcends regional boundaries, making the stakes truly global. This recent intercept in the South China Sea is not just another military incident. It's a symptom of a larger, more dangerous trend. As China continues to challenge international norms, and as the US responds with equally firm resistance, the risks of miscalculation and conflict grow. The stakes are high, not just for the US and China, but for the entire world. These waters are not only a battleground for power, they're a lifeline for global trade and stability. What do you think? Are these encounters a necessary show of force, or are they pushing us toward a dangerous tipping point? Let us know in the comments. For more insights into global events, subscribe and stay informed, because what happens here affects us all.